Good afternoon. This session is labor market data and marketing insights. It's going to give you the best candidates. So the world of work has been undergoing change for several years, driven by technology, economic, and societal factors. But this year, the COVID pandemic has increased and accelerated and even intensified a lot of those changes. We see the way jobs are changing. Industries are impacted by the pandemic, including healthcare, hospitality, retail, transportation, entertainment, and tourism. And jobs and the labor market is shifting to adapt to some of these changes in the labor market. It's affecting the workers that have to now try to gain new skills, try to find roles, and have to kind of cope with now how their existing skills are going to be valuable in their new roles. Some people are working remotely now, so the need for digital skills is intensified for all types of jobs. And at the same time, the pandemic has drastically altered our economy, resulting in high levels of unemployment and making it difficult for an increasing number of people and families just really to make ends meet overall. Good afternoon. My name is Darren Finley. I'm the president of Engaged Excel Recruitment Solutions, and I've had over 30 years of experience recruiting and helping the companies really find and keep the best people. I love helping our clients craft recruitment strategies to help them transform their recruitment function from a transactional function to a very strategic function in the organization. I'm an advocate for the greatest possible hiring manager experience and the greatest possible candidate experience because we know that it drives better business results. Let's just jump right on into today and talk about the labor market. So the concept today is to think about how we can take these labor market insights and put them together with some marketing insights to really drive this great candidate experience and help you deliver the best candidates to your hiring managers and to your organization. So we'll talk about using informed labor market analytics, and we'll spend a little bit of time about that, but how you use that to craft your strategies overall. But I hope at the end of the day, in the short time we have together, you're going to understand what types of data are available around analytics and labor market data, what information in the data can be used to help you craft your strategy, and then how to use all that to really help you drive the right candidate experience. You know, I can't help but stop and just talk about the new coronaviruses that are surging across the country today. The 7-day moving average is blowing past the 100,000 mark, and it's increasing by 40% from a week ago. I think the number was 178,000 cases this past Sunday. It's crazy. The U.S. positivity rates increased to 8.5%, has now surpassed the summer peak, and the median positive rate across all the states is even higher at 10%. So as a result of the surge in cases, the number of people currently hospitalized is a little over 55,000 and just under the summer peak. And the 7-day average of daily deaths, unfortunately, has risen significantly from a low of 659 in October to 984 as of yesterday. Given the hospitalizations and deaths lag by about 4 weeks, there's a lot of reasons for concern. There are early signs that the virus is impacting the economic recovery, but that impact is still quite limited. And even as of today, when I'm recording this on the 11th, that's on Monday of November, the Dow hit new high. And so this recovery, while positive, is not really across the board recovery. In particular, the restaurant industry is experiencing some strain as seated diners, according to data from Open Table, significantly fallen in early November from its average level during October. This could reflect the virus, it could reflect colder weather, or a combination of the two. We see that mobility and small business employment have also started to decline and retrench. And more broadly, the New York Fed's weekly economic index has yet to show a meaningful deterioration really across the board. So the virus will presumably have a bigger impact if it leads state governments to impose more stringent measures to mitigate the spread of the virus. And so far, states have only announced really modest restrictions on activity like curfews and also kind of slowing the virus. I think Illinois is probably the only exception, which is November the 4th closed all dining service at bars and restaurants across the entire state. And as we compare the economic indicators in Illinois to the rest of the Midwest, we found that since the government began restricting dining service, activity has slowed more sharply in Illinois than the rest of the Midwest. So there's a recent spike in seated diners, which could be due to local counties not enforcing the governor's orders. If other states do follow Illinois' lead, we could expect to see similar declines in economic activity really across the board. And the bottom line is the official data shows that the labor market has made an impressive recovery so far. But the high frequency data that we see every week, the recovery has not quite been equitable. So let's dig into that just a little bit more. You can tell that I'm a data market junkie, and I love understanding the labor market both on a macro and a micro level. And so as we begin to think about what's going on in the marketplace, you look at this graph and you go, our unemployment is really tight, coming out of 18 into 19, it stayed very low overall, and then the pandemic hit. And you see the big spike that occurred at the end of March and the 1st of April. COVID-19 is really reshaping the U.S. job market. And when you look at the people that are continually on some type of assistance overall, this is almost 22 million people, the longer-term employed, that are still struggling. So the new normal from 8 months ago really is just the now normal today. And so while virus infections continue to rise across the nation, we did see 638,000 jobs added to the economy in October, taking the unemployment rate down to about 6.9 from 7.9 in September. The news is even more encouraging when you look at the private sector, which added a very healthy 906,000 jobs during the month. Now, there's been a drop in the state and local government education employment by 159,000, and the temporary census workers of 147,000. That dragged the overall payroll improvement down, or it would have been over 1 million. Other good news is the job improvement skewed toward the younger cohort. Slicing that data down by educational attainment shows us that the lion's share of job gains among workers in high school education or less. They were seeing more and more jobs come back to them. We've now seen the U.S. recover over 12.1 million jobs that were lost during the pandemic, reflecting a 54.5% recovery rate. October saw a very broad improvement in every major sector of the private labor market, with the exception of utilities. Yet the number of long-term unemployed, that's those that are in jobless for 27 weeks or more, rose sharply in October to 3.5 million, up from 2.4 million the month before. Many of these workers will exhaust their unemployment insurance benefits in the coming weeks. As I mentioned before, there's about 21 million Americans that are still claiming some type of unemployment or pandemic assistance. So there's mixed recovery points in the markets and all labor segments really across the board. So you look at these mixed signals, right? The labor markets have still remained tight as some workers remain concerned about health and child care issues. However, in some cases, firms reported it was easier to find workers, according to a report from the Fed that came out last week. It also noted that wages increased in most districts across the U.S. amid this difficulty of finding workers, especially low-wage workers or high-demand jobs. Most of our wage reports that we get and the supplemental the data that we may find shows us that incremental wage increases are in the 1% to 2% category. But I'll tell you, I've seen in certain markets where the wage increase has gone up 20 to 30% in order to attract entry-level jobs. So there's a lot of mixed signals out there over the last several weeks. The good news is that business applications for new businesses remain robust, which means business formation should not be a drag on job creation. So some of those smaller businesses that are trying to create more jobs, they're still out there, and they're still opening bravely in this new time that we're in. Also, hourly work continues to recover as time card punches, according to the Ultimate Kronos Group, rose by 1% from a week ago to 96.1% of the March 15 levels. That's almost back to normal for hourly jobs. Again, not counting the restaurant jobs. But now there is some bad news. Small employment continues overall to trend down. And with virus cases surging, that sector is likely to feel the brunt of any government-imposed restrictions on business activity. The situation for small businesses is especially worrisome given the dimming prospects for near-term financial relief from the federal government. We may not see anything until Q1 of next year. Meanwhile, the latest data on initial jobless claims and continuing claims fall somewhere in the middle of good news and bad news, right? On the positive side, continuing claims continue to fall sharply, though some of that's due to recipients exhausting their 26-week state-funded benefits. There's still layoffs and furloughs that are occurring. On the negative side, we continue to see initial jobless claims are still at a historically high level and above the peaks that were reached during the most recent 2008-2009 crisis. The bottom line is official data shows that the labor market's made an impressive recovery so far, but the other data shows that the recovery may not be quite equitable across the board. So it's just a lot of mixed signals. Like I said, even when you look at some of these charts, you look at job postings on the upper left, right? Indeed, job posting index is rising by 0.7 points from a week ago to 95.8% of the February 1st levels, almost all the way back up to where it was. Not quite still where it was, and certainly not back up to the 2019 or 2018 level, but up drastically from the low that you see down in April. Secondly, business applications continue to go up. The chart on the upper right goes into the number of time punches for hourly workers. And you can see that that has also just kind of across all the different regions come back up to where it almost was in March of last year. So that's some good news, right? The other thing that we're watching, and then you have to think about as you try to do some analysis around the work that you're doing around labor market analytics, is this mobility trend. And so the bottom right graph that you see is from Google. It's Google mobility data. And the mobility data shows us that there's still a lot of folks that are working from home. A lot of folks are still kind of staying in, and that number has not risen up. But the number of folks that are going out and getting groceries kind of dropped way down in April, but then it's kind of remains relatively moderate throughout the summer months. But all of a sudden you get into August and into late September, you see the number starting to come down, people that are getting out. And certainly people going into the workplace, that's that dotted purple line that you see that drops way down, along with the transit station, movement from a mobility standpoint. It still stays down very low. So we know folks are not just going back into the office. And so this data just kind of tells us a lot about what's going on in the marketplace when unemployment's making its changes, the economy's trying to recover, there's more new jobs that are out there, people are still trying to recoup some of the losses across the board. So telemarketing, we know, is certainly here now. It is kind of staying in place today. But we have to make sense of all of this, and we got to bring this data together and help our organizations think differently about what they're going to do in the future. So there's a lot of different places where you can pull data. 40 years ago, we thought about the different kind of data that was out there and how organizations were valued. Hard assets, product, property, real estate accounted for 80% of a company's value. But today, it's the soft assets, including reputation, brand equity, your patents, your R&D, that actually counts for 85% of the value of an organization. So the focus on employees and the labor market and the workforce as a source of value has been further reinforced by those things, as well as the pandemic. So there are a lot of sources you can go to gain knowledge, and some I don't even have highlighted on here. So whether it's Glassdoor or Indeed or LinkedIn, just open yourself up to getting more and more data in that you want to take in to understand the market. But in reference to labor market data specifically, I always try to dig deeper into both the labor and the consumer market data that I can find. So here's several of my go-to different sources that I have. So first is the Bureau of Labor. So the BLS, it's one of the most comprehensive for historical data. So when you look at that, you have historical data, and there you can find a few highlights. But it often takes a lot of digging through that data to really understand the micro trends that are occurring in the data. More recently, I was going to read in the Federal Reserve Beige Book. Now I know it's going to officially make me a nerd, and that's okay because, again, I kind of enjoy understanding the economy, understanding the data. But the Federal Reserve Beige Book that comes out monthly, it breaks down the labor market and economics into each of the Federal Reserve's unique markets in which they operate, and provides specific perspective to the industries that are prevalent and impact those markets, along with consumer trends and housing. Consumer pricing data, and those numbers are just really helpful to understand some of those macro and micro economic trends that are happening. And Bank of America also publishes weekly research similar to that of the Beige Book, but it's also incorporating more graphics, and I need pictures to understand things. It also includes some coronavirus impacts and other mobility and consumer habits, further insights. Gartner's Talent Neuron is also great for supply and demand tool that can provide micro market and role type level intelligence for the roles that you may be recruiting for from a supply and demand data standpoint. It'll help you get to know who the competitors are in those markets and those challenges you might find by each role and how supply is tight or available. The Talent Board, of course, provides a ton of insights with their partnerships around the candidate experience, preferences, and best practices to help you drive that best candidate experience possible. And Claritas is one that I'm going to go to in more depth here in just a second as we talk about segmentation and how to craft a more targeted message that will resonate with your candidates. So know your market and the demographic trends, and then let's hit some highlights around those cohorts that can make things a little bit different. So there's really just a couple of slides I wanted to go over that, and the first one is around women, boomers, and Gen Xers, okay? And one of the harsh realities that we're seeing in the marketplace is that women are abandoning their careers and leaving corporate America. It's extremely disturbing to see this trend. This nonstop juggling of work commitments and family needs, and in the face of daycare and school closings and nursing homes and office closures, is causing many women to opt out of the workforce. In September alone, over 865,000 women, think about it, 865,000 women aged 20 or older left the workforce. When you compare that to the 216,000 men that left, it is a significant dent in the available workforce that we have to go grab and use in our workforces today. Some new research from AARP and a survey they did of 1,500 individuals examining the relationship between family-friendly benefits and female representation in both the workforce and senior management found out that 58% of caregivers report spending increased time caring for adults since the pandemic began. 61% of adults have increased their child care responsibilities. While those numbers are probably not surprising to any of you on the call, the impact of that, though, may have a much longer-term effect on the overall labor market and the availability of a workforce based on workforce participation. Stress levels at home are rising, and 77 respondents to the AARP study reported strong to moderate increase in stress levels at home because of the things they had to do to take care of. The family, the children, the school, the teaching, and everybody working in the same room in some cases. When you think about Gen Xers, Americans that are born between 1965 and early 1980, they're already more likely to be caregivers than those in other generations. It's not just the boomers that are providing that care, so the Gen Xers are really involved in it as well. The average caregiver of an older adult is actually a 49-year-old working woman who provides 20 hours of unpaid work each week caring for her mother. And that's according to the Family Caregiver Alliance. With the average age of motherhood rising in the U.S., women in their late 40s and early 50s are more likely to have children at home as well. Add coronavirus to the mix, and the stresses really begin to mount. You also may find that it's surprising that older workers that are getting close to returning back to full employment. So we talked about the pandemic and the impact on the labor market being very mixed, right? This is one of those interesting components of that. Older workers are almost back to full employment. And since unemployment peaked in April for those 55 and older, it has steadily dropped since then, back to 5.4% in October. So that group and that cohort has not been hit as hard and have not come out of the workforce as much as some of the Gen Xers and even some of the other folks in the market. The other side that I want to just kind of share with you and think about some cohorts that we're in the workforce, and millennials continue to be a stronger and stronger force in the workforce, and their preferences are continue to drive change. And the Gen Zers are really right behind them. And so younger workers in both the millennial and the Gen Zers are just more and more motivated about the purpose of the organization. So while you may have the individuals in the last slide that are really focused on caregivers and taking care of children, taking care of parents at home, millennials and Gen Zers really are more focused on the purpose of the organization. Millennials are motivated by their why, and they're demanding that we build purpose within our organizations today. 70% now can say buy or boycott products or services based on the social stances of the companies that make or sell them. And it's not just about being supportive of the social causes, but also proactively to solve those underlying problems. And you can see the quotes from the Levi's CEO, Chip is a fantastic guy. He really believes that doing right is the right thing, and doing right is going to reward your shareholders long term. It's just not the right thing to do, but it's the right thing to do to reward your team members as well as your shareholders. And then when you think about the comment here by Pfizer, about the purpose-driven organization, you stay true to your purpose. It gives you clear direction. It's that compass, it's that star telling you that this is where we all are going to go. It unites the organization, creates cohesiveness, and bring results. All three of these organizations are driving a lot of success in the marketplace because they are focused on the things that are important to the next generations that come along. So I shared both of those slides with you because as we begin to talk about more and more about segmentation, you have all these different generational aspects into the labor market. You don't just have a labor market of millennials. You don't just have a labor market of boomers, but we have a very much of a melting pot of a labor market. You have to consider all of that when you're putting your go-to-market strategies together. When you look at this slide as an example, it's no surprise that significant changes are occurring in the labor market. Over the next 10 years, additional demographic changes will continue to impact both the availability of the labor pool via a reduction in the total size. So you look at that chart on the left, the total size of workforce participation is going down, as well as the aging of the workforce overall. So I think you understand now there's a ton of data out there, and while I geek out on it, I have a day job too, just like you. So let's discuss how you can put the labor market data, real data, to work for you. So when I think about our roles and what our day jobs really are, and the information that's out there that we can use to impact our strategy, I just want to encourage you to be the business partner your C-suite always wanted you to be. Move from a reactive environment to a proactive strategic approach. Think about what keeps your CEO and your COO awake at night. Is it turnover? Is it constant churn in the frontline workers? Is it having the best talent to take the organization to the next level? Is it succession planning? If you don't know, ask the question. Understand what it is that keeps them up at night. We know top performers drive the business, and now we know about labor market data. So now you have to be proactive. So once you know the business issue at hand, what really is a business issue, understand who your top performers are, pull the labor market data. Now you can begin to craft a strategy and an experience that's going to drive better success from a recruiting team. So, a couple of years ago, I really became empowered and enlightened at a bowling alley. I think that's kind of funny because I don't ever go bowling, right? But if you listen to the data, it'll tell you what to do. So we had a challenge where we had to hire 1,200 pharmacy technicians in a very short period of time, in a market that was fully depleted of a source of talent. There are several pharmacies in the area, several large organizations that had hired these pharmacy technicians, and we were bumping our heads up against the wall. We were spending $180,000 a quarter in every possible medium you can think of, every possible advertising you can think of, social media across the board, and quite honestly, we were failing. But more to come on that in just a moment. So when I think about segmentation, I want to kind of talk to you about what that really is. And segmentation is really a way to define a group of characteristics that workers have in common and your top performers have in common. It includes demographic trends, it includes lifestyle trends, and consumer behavioral trends as well. And so segmentation is this science around consumer behavior. And we combine the science around consumer behavior with the labor market data, we can then determine what the lifestyle traits are, spending patterns, and preferences of who our top performers are. But you have to find out who your top performers are and how to do that. So we have to look really close at the top performers to identify who they are and where they live and how they spend their money. So I've got a marketing background, so it's probably why I get so excited about consumer segmentation, because I want to understand what the 4 P's of marketing are, or how I can go sell more to candidates to get them to join the organization, because recruiting is a sales role. But at the end of the day, it's also about finding more top performers. And how do you go out and more precisely target, using a very targeted sourcing strategy to attract and engage the most qualified talent pool that's out there. So with segmentation, you can do several things. By analyzing your current labor force, your current workforce, and I'm talking about not just the workforce or labor force in your market area or in your city or in your county or wherever it is that you live, or wherever it is you have locations in the organization where your plants are or where your retail locations are or your offices are. I'm talking about your top performers, your most tenured employees, the ones you want to replicate because they do a really good job. The segmentation can help you with that. And what we're going to try to do is take this 360-degree view of your top performers from the lens of a consumer. What are the demographics? What kind of cars do they drive? What are their financial behaviors? What are their attitudes? Where do they eat? What kind of media do they consume? What are they doing on their time off in their lifestyle? What kind of products do they consume? When and where do they shop? Is it online or is it in a store? We want to understand everything we can about these candidates because we're going to use that information to craft this fantastic candidate experience that's going to drive a higher qualified candidate and more top performers. It's going to tell us how to capitalize on this new phenomenon of remote working. Because if you have individuals that are your top performers that are thriving there, that's a strategy. If you have individuals that are not thriving there and can't go into work, that's another strategy. So having this information at our fingertips is going to help us drive a much more effective candidate experience and top performer recruiting. So here's how we kind of do that. We use PRISM segmentation. So to understand that, you got to understand that all of us fall into one of 68 unique PRISM segments. And it's really just a marketing way of saying, here are the unique things around the behavior that you do as a consumer that puts you into a certain bucket, okay? And that certain bucket is going to help us use who you are, what you buy, and where you go. We're going to bring all that together with your behavior and the kind of devices that you use, and that's going to give us information about how to go deliver our message back to those individual segments, whether it's digital, whether it's TV, whether it's out of home, on billboards. You'd be surprised to see some billboards that are out there, whether it's radio, if it's radio, what station it is. So with segmentation on the far right-hand side, you can see that we'll learn about where does this person buy their gas? What kind of watches do they buy? How long is their commute? What kind of sneakers do they buy? How do they vote? What kind of car do they drive? It tells us a lot about the things that are important to them from a consumer standpoint. As you continue to see, all the things that we talked about, the why and the messages and the organizational priorities that are out there, it's important that we align those organizational priorities with the segments that that's going to resonate with. So our goal is to uncover these behavioral commonalities within all the segments of your top performers so we can craft this really cool strategy for them. So back to our bowling story. I said we had a ton of money we were spending, $180,000 a quarter, and we were not successful at all. So I went to our IO psychologist and our marketing team, and I said, I need help. They said, we're dying here. So they said, let us do some work. Let us identify who the top performers are. Let's conduct focus groups. Let's segment those top performers, and let's see what the data is going to tell us. And so we did that. We brought the top performers together. We had focus groups. We listened to them. We listened to them about the job. And what it helped us do was learn about the essence of the job. So filling a prescription, we thought was just about being accurate. Well, quite honestly, accuracy is a piece of it. But there was another piece that began to come out in the information that we gained from those focus groups. We learned that they were very compassionate individuals. And they had this passion about making these outbound calls and understanding and getting to know these patients that had to have their prescriptions filled. And that compassion drove them to be really good at their job. And it also helped us learn that it fulfilled them, helping individuals get their prescriptions on time and correct was a big part of how they lived their job. So as we segmented this entire group, we found that they came into 5 different segments across all different types of ages and demographics and races. There were still 5 segments. The confounding part was is that of all 5 of those segments, the only 2 things they had in common is that they would go bowling once a month and they ate at Taco Bell once a month. I began to scratch my head and wonder to myself, what in the world have I got myself into, and how is that going to help me in recruiting? And so our AO team came back and said, listen to the data. It'll tell you what to do. And they came back and said, you need to have a bowling party. And I told them they've lost their ever-loving mind. And they said, no, you have a bowling party, the farm techs will show up, because that's what they do. That's how they enjoy life. That's how they behave. And then you can talk about how they can be compassionate. Then you can talk about how they can be fulfilled. So we started having bowling parties. We got the hiring managers involved. Our rate of qualified applicant increased by 29%. We changed our ads to reflect the essence of the job itself, and we filled all of those jobs in 8 months. And very high satisfaction, both from a candidate standpoint as well as the customer standpoint. And so that was what convinced me that if I listened to the data, it would tell me what to do. And then recently, again, I had another opportunity to use it with a totally different type of job, totally out of a different kind of role. It was around mobile diesel mechanics. And so if you look at this slide, you see there's a couple of things here. You see the truck at the top and then the hunter at the bottom. But in the middle, on the left-hand side, you see one of the segments that I pulled out to show you. And the segments that we learn by using Prism segmentation gives us one of these. It tells us about that individual, about the age and the family mix, and the ownership of RVs was very high for that group. They also enjoyed hunting and fishing, and regardless of their age, they really didn't like technology, but they were big fans of country music. And across this group, they fell into 8 different segments across their entire organization. Again, all races, all ages, all tenures across them, but these were the top performers. They fell into 8 segments. And the number one thing in each of those 8 segments is outdoor lifestyles, hunting and fishing, ATVs, motorcycle. The other thing that stood out is that children and family were key drivers of their behavior, their spending, their time, and their career choices. And we also found they had very low tech adoption. So they really didn't like the idea of having to do anything on a computer at all. And so we crafted a new strategy once we understood these things. And we began talking about, we'd always talked about how great this truck was. And the truck is fantastic. It's a very high-tech truck. It's a custom-made truck. It's a big part of their job is that they live in it every day. There's also an iPad that they use. But once we focused in on an understanding that they wanted control over their quality of life, they wanted to be able to spend time outdoors, we were able to go in and increase the candidate pool by 50% more with the modeling that we used and with the new advertising that we used in the next 12-month period. We reduced their no starts to less than 1%, and it had been almost 50% before. We improved the retention rate by 240%, and some of those jobs had actually been open for 2 to 3 years and had been filled with overtime. So at the end of the day, the story here is that Prism segmentation and labor market data combined helps you craft an experience that drives top performers into the organizations and will help you understand better how to be more consultative to your teams and to your leadership. So whether it's a bowling party, whether it's the essence of the job, or whether it's finding people who were born to work there, we believe, and I believe, that the way to use data and intelligence to craft this experience is to think about lifestyle marketing, make that connection back to the organization. Use targeted messages with those individuals. Use a device-specific approach based on their tech adoption. Use your demographic-appropriate graphics as well, depending on if you're trying to bring more in exactly the same or bring in a different group. You also have incentive equity as well. When you think about that, it was kind of fun at DFS. Instead of using an Amazon card to entice them once they got on board, we began using a Bass Pro Shop gift card. And that produced a much more engaged candidate in their onboarding. So at the end of the day, I hope that I can kind of help you get started on learning more about your labor market, how to use Prism segmentation, how to bring it all together to create these great candidate experiences. But number one, you got to get your data. Get your data delivered to you. Subscribe to email notifications. Look at the Beige Book. Look up the Bank of America security profile they do each week. But understand your labor market data and watch for trends. Watch for trends that are not just happening now, but also in the future. Understand who your top performers are. So you got to spend some time with your team, with your leadership, with those individuals, and do your focus groups. Understand the key competencies of the role. Understand the reason they stay. So forget about exit interviews and start your stay interviews. That information can not only be valuable, helping you craft this recruitment strategy, but also a stay strategy as you share that information back into your leadership team. Collect your demographic data, segment that into prism segments, and find the commonalities where you can use the right message for the right candidates at the right time, and then design a uniquely curated experience to draw that talent in. And so on my last note, I thought it'd be fun to leave you with something about long-term planning, right? I'm not talking about 10 years, not 20 years, but 80 years. Can you think about planning out to 2100? I can't wait. I'm going to be 136 years old then, hopefully. The global demographic shift, and this is taking labor market data and putting it on a global scale. The global demographic shifts will put significant pressure on the existing economies and labor markets around the globe, but at the same time provide a lot of great opportunities. So interestingly, the U.S. stays in the top 4 at a relatively stable population. China's population is actually going to contract by almost half and move down below India. Nigeria grows almost 4 times its current population. And there's 4 countries today that are not even in the top 10. They're going to be there: Ethiopia, Egypt, the Congo, and Tanzania. And then there's also 4 that are in there today. They're going to fall out of the top 10. So Brazil, Russia, Japan, and Bangladesh all fall out. Of course, there's a lot of notable absences here of any European country. So while this is not an economic status list, this is a list of population, and there'll be significant impacts on global economy and labor markets and workforce of the future. So thank you for your time today. Thanks for letting me have some fun